and welcome to our Cyvis webinar called The Digital Transformation is Knocking on the Boardroom Door. So I'm Eva DeFleury, the Product Marketing Manager at Cyvis and the host of this webinar today. So we know that at least 30% of enterprises have fully embarked on their digital transformation. And we know that 80% of business leaders are making it really a priority for their enterprises and for their organizations. And we know that the landscape of business is really transforming, especially now after the global pandemic. Digitalization is really revolutionizing the way that we work. And we know that board members, management teams, and like C-suite teams are really prioritizing this. And yet, the room in which they work, so the boardroom, the executive boardroom, has not changed really since the 90s, hasn't really evolved to this new context, and it's not giving them the tools to actually take digital decision making. So how in this context of digitalization should the boardroom evolve? So today I'm here with Jan-Peter Lee, our President of Europe at Cyvis, and Danielle Hanley, the VP of our APAC region, who is calling us from London. So to discuss what digital transformation means to the boardroom as we know it, to share the insights from their customers' perspective and their markets, and also look at what are the critical requirements from customers and decision makers in terms of boardroom and executive decision-making space. So my first question is to both of you, and I'll start with you, Jan-Peter. So customers come to you, they want to invest in a boardroom, they probably had one and they want a new space. Can you share with us the pain points that they're currently seeing with the space that they have?
Absolutely, Emily, and it's a very good question because we have a lot of customers out there that have invested in boardrooms that I would classify as single purpose, meaning that they build to kind of cover one or two needs. Organizations are evolving, digitalization is driving change, and that change is often in the way of new digital assets, new software applications, multiple computer assets being used in the room and consumed in the room. And that is something that a lot of organizations want to achieve with the next investment.
But they can't in the current room. So
not necessarily, because it's expensive to upgrade or make changes.
Another pain point?
I think in Cyvis we do a lot of control rooms around the world that are extremely business critical. I think the executive and the boardrooms are kind of in the same league. They are business critical. They have to work when the board meeting is taking place. They have to work when key investors or customers are coming in. So the business critical aspect, I think we'll see an increased attention going forward.
Yeah, and I guess that's why we hear that board members or managers don't even know how to handle the tech, or the room just doesn't work when they have to make decisions. That's a very good point. Danielle, do you have anything to add to the pain points you hear from your customers when it comes to boardrooms?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with everything JP said. And one of the things that we see time and time again is actually the question of ROI. So when it comes to, operating a workplace, one of the biggest costs is actually people's time. So, decision makers sometimes struggle to quantify, whether the investment is actually worth it, depending on how often the room is used. So that's a question we get a lot of the time around the ROI for these rooms. So I think another one today we see time and time again is interoperability. So there's so many different platforms that are being used today for communication purpose, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business, Poly, Cisco, BlueJeans, Zoom. It's tough really from a user perspective to be expected to know how to access and get into different calls. So I think being interoperable and providing a really seamless method for joining some of these calls is super important today.
Yeah, and I think the boardroom is obviously the room where important, critical, as you said, decisions happen, and it's not a place where people want to spend time on trying to get to the technology working. You want a premium user experience.
Of course, yeah.
So Daniel, you're working with some large global financial services organization who have their teams of collaboration specialists in Asia, where you are. So they're very forward-looking when it comes to their boardrooms and their meeting space. Can you share some of the observation and how digital transformation is impacting the boardroom, specifically with those kind of large global financial services organization?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of key drivers that we see. I think number one, boards and senior management teams are really looking to be more data-driven when it comes to decision making. Okay, so in order to do that, they need a space and a technology that allows them to visualize and manipulate the data as a group. And today, that's not always the case. And so it's something that is become higher on the agenda now to provide these spaces, allow them to work with this type of data. I think also, just the nature of the workforce today and the leadership team, they are spread out globally. And I think, we're seeing business travel being heavily restricted. And of course, in today's climate, physical meetings are really being restricted. So the question is how do you optimize that collaboration when you can't be in the same room, but you need to come together to make those important decisions? And, this is where the C-suite and the leadership, they really rely on effective communication and information exchange to be able to do their jobs. So that's something that, of course, has traditionally been handled in a physical meeting space where they're able to share and present documents and data. Okay, so if we're going to sort of replace that today, replace that face-to-face experience, then there needs to be really effective tools that allow these teams to meet virtually. And as we mentioned before, the tools have to be really simple, easy to operate, intuitive, and
work every time.
Work every time and work with whatever application that the leadership team decide to use.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So based on dealing with numbers of customers around the region, what consideration really should companies take when building boardrooms, or decision-making space, as we call them, in the age of digital transformation? So I'll start with you, GP. What is top of mind? What should they really prioritize?
They should prioritize various things, but one aspect that is often forgotten is the fact that these type of environments and rooms actually represents the company. And you can potentially represent the company in a board meeting and or for potential investors.
It's a prestige space.
It's a prestige. It's a part of the branding exercise. And some companies are actively using these spaces as part of the HR campaign or recruiting processes to attract the younger, more digitalized generations of potential employees. Absolutely. And I think that is a holistic aspect that needs to be taken into consideration, even though it's kind of one thing on its own. And of course, investing in a boardroom and executive meeting space is not something that you do every single day. And Daniel's point is so important. Buy something that you can easily upgrade, easy support, and gives you the flexibility.
So you're saying they should think of the Y effect with technology that works every time, that is a premium user experience, and that can evolve with time. It's kind of future-proof type of boardroom.
Future-proof and proofing is a good word.
Very good. Daniel, any other suggestion for customers of large enterprises looking into investing in a new boardroom?
So I think, one of the real basic things is ensuring that you're providing a really engaging experience for the people in the room. And I think if you're connecting to people in different parts of the world potentially, then you really need to pay attention to things like sound and audio, video quality, because they make a huge difference to the success of the meeting. So it's quite basic, but we see it time and time again that these things are overlooked, and they really impact on the success of the meeting and the user experience. So I think just taking care of the basics is probably a good thing to think about.
Absolutely, and I think you used the term face-to-face like type of interaction, and I mean we'll deep dive into the context of today. But as you mentioned, it's more likely that people will travel less for business, but they want to maintain this personal connection, this user experience, and this kind of face-to-face interactions. And only great audio and great sound and great video can do that. And vice versa, it can also trigger very bad personal connections and bad meetings. So I just mentioned we obviously in a very particular context of a global pandemic, and we, at least in Europe, starting to going back to some sort of normal. And we all had to learn new ways of working and collaborating from home and the office, and a mix of both. So what are your predictions for the boardroom specifically? GP, I'll start with you.
I think our habits will change, right? People will fly less, and I don't think we necessarily will go back to where we were. There will be a new normal out there. But I think also companies are now starting to realize what happens when people are working from home, and that's something that will be discussed later on. And I think the strategic value of the boardroom, for example, the strategic value will increase. Something happens when people have an opportunity to sit face to face and discuss an innovation process. Something happens when people have the opportunity to have a meeting, a coffee break, and come back in again. And those aspects drives a lot of things within an organization that you lose when you're working from home or when people work from home. So I think we will very quickly come to a point where those points will start to be important on the agenda again, instead of just getting beyond the critical phase of enabling the workforce to work from home. We will start to see the impact of having distributed teams. Now let's bring them on back onto campus. Let's give them environments where they can actually work and produce something that makes sense and adds value.
So giving them a reason really to get back to the office that brings more features than just being at home.
Absolutely. And some environments we probably will have to cater for social distancing, for example. But my prediction is they will be even more important going forward.
Great. Daniel, what's your take on this?
I agree with JP. I think the type of work that we're likely to see in the office is going to change. So it's going to probably move away from really sort of focused work, individual work, to one that is much more collaborative. So you go to the office to have those meetings and actually physically spend time with people. Yeah. So I think that's a really important trend, to be able to ensure that the right tools are provided then for the teams when they are coming together to meet. So that's the first one, because we see early research coming out of North America that we're likely to see around 500 to 700% increase in people actually working from home, around 2 days a week. So with that dynamic, the question is, how do you bridge the physical meeting space and those virtual platforms, and really, as you say, provide those engaging experiences where people are come to the office so they can be really effective from a collaboration perspective, but still connect to their colleagues who are working from home.
Oh, that's a very good point. So we're saying that the boardroom won't just be a boardroom then. It's something that it's incentivizing people to come and maybe do other things in the boardroom. Is that a multi-purpose aspect maybe of the boardroom?
Absolutely, and that goes back to our earlier point around ROI. So driving the utilization of these rooms and making users as productive and efficient as possible when it comes to decision making is key to driving your ROI. So it makes sense that these boardrooms are not, used once a week or twice a week, but they're highly utilized by the team. So that's going to involve providing a more broader sort of set of tools that allow them to carry out different types of work in the space.
So GP, do you see also that multi-purpose aspect of the boardroom being very relevant with the customers that you meet? Why so?
Absolutely. I've been to a lot of large or small companies around the world where they have invested in the boardroom and it's used once a month. And that is just wrong.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other functions. We talked earlier about kind of the digital evolving organization where you potentially want to have other workflows or software applications used to cater for different needs. Within some organizations, you also have other departments that potentially use the boardroom as their meeting arena. And I think the COVID-19 situation has kind of stressed that importance, especially when some organizations will have to set, the teams working on crisis management, for example. Where will they work? Where will they sit? And investing in a boardroom, we can say, okay, for the board meetings, that's a couple of meetings a month, that's it. A crisis management room, ideally you should never use, apart from the drills. And that's a very easy example on how you can combine two kind of aspects to create a multi-purpose space.
Can you give us maybe a use case or like a practical example?
Absolutely. And we have a brilliant customer that have a requirement to have a crisis management room.
Okay.
They also wanted to invest in a boardroom because the investor meetings was very important. They were a stock listed company. So they combined everything into one room, state-of-the-art management board meeting. At the same time, by a click of a button, the room can turn itself into a crisis management room. So they kind of cater for all needs in that room, combined with making it into a very nice meeting room that everybody can use if it's not used by board members or the crisis management team.
Fantastic. So really a multi-purpose, function-rich, collaborative, executive decision-making space. So maybe the term boardroom is over, and we can rename that in many different ways. And you, Daniel, in the region of the world you work in, the type of customers you see, is multi-purpose, that aspect of the story also very relevant for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have one of our large financial services customers. They actually have traditional boardroom. But what they've realized is that it also the space lends itself extremely well to the data science initiative that they're running at the moment in the organization. And actually the data science teams are coming into the room to use the space when they're not having the board meetings, because it allows them to really immerse themselves in all of the different information and data that they have. So it's provided a really interesting sort of use case and opportunity outside of traditional board meetings.
Fantastic. And I guess it's because you may have a lot of different meeting rooms also catered with a great technology, but I guess the boardroom is also a big room that caters like multidisciplinary teams with a lot of members, and you have this kind of wide aspect video wall that also renders itself very well, I guess, for a special project or crisis management. So it's not just a boardroom.
Correct. Yep.
Great. So to summarize, how can the boardroom as organization know them really evolved as an asset for them in this age of digitalization? GP.
I think the days where you build environments that are just single purpose, or we go in, I present something to you, or I make a video call, those days are over. These rooms will require more kind of workflows, digital production to happen in the rooms than what we have seen in the past. And I think that is something that we covered in this conversation, but something that I think is very important for the future.
Yeah.
Organizations don't necessarily know what assets, programs, applications they will be using, working on tomorrow or the week after or the next year. So these type of environments have to be highly flexible, that can change with that organizational change and that push for digitalization over time.
Great. So a room that adapts and that caters for dynamic workflows. Daniel, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree again with that point. I think being application agnostic is important so that it's able to support, or the space is able to support as many different use cases as possible. I think that's that's a key part of it. And I think given the situation that we're in today, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it's super important to give, our workforce, the compelling reasons to actually come into the office, where we know they can be more efficient working together. So I think spaces that are able to support, lots of different ways of working and really add value to the decision-making process are going to be really, really important moving forward.
Great.
And I guess the hybrid aspect of things as well is important because, yes, the board members or executives might be sitting in the room, but they also have to ensure that they are ready if something happens again in the future. So these rooms are becoming a hybrid of people sitting in the room, working from home, or in another regional office.
Very important. So we've learned really that, so we know digitalization is completely changing the way that we work. And even, I think, things have really accelerated these last 3 months. And in post-COVID-19, we know digital workplace will have changed completely. And the boardroom as a space will need to adapt to be a multi-purpose space. We need to be future-proof, we'll need to be agnostic in terms of application, and we'll need to offer that user experience as really compelling for people to come, not just to do their single task, but to really collaborate. So the workplace and the boardroom will become really a place to work and to interact. So thank you very much to my guests, so GP, our President of Europe, and Daniel, our Vice President of the APAC region. And to learn more about the future of the boardroom, how digitalization is knocking on the boardroom door, you can visit cyvis.com for more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.